Greeting LeadingAge Virginia, Jack York here from IN2L with the one and only Professor Larry Minix, my sidekick for the next 45 minutes. So Larry, why don't you kick off with, we both have great relationships with LeadingAge Virginia. I got a particular story to tell about Melissa in a second. Why don't you kick off first?
Oh, no, you tell yours first and I'll end with mine.
Okay, all right. Well, the obvious question of why I love Melissa, if we were in a big group, I'd get thousands of responses probably. But the answer is that at the LeadingAge meeting of state executives, this is about 2 or 3 years ago, I was paying for everybody's dinner. IN2L was paying everybody's dinner, but I had my dog with me. And I had to get my dog from one building to the other. He's a 17-year-old dog. He limps a lot. And he was having some constipation trouble. And Melissa jumped in, walked my dog 3 or 4 blocks through Denver. And if I don't want to get too graphic, but if you look under that tree, you can see that there was the work done that I think only Melissa could get out of my little Lucky. So Melissa, that's above and beyond. You are the state exec of the year from a Jack York standpoint. So go ahead, Larry, you can try to follow that one.
Melissa doesn't want us to say much about her, so let me just say that based on your dog story, she knows how to bring out the best in most anybody and any creature. And Melissa is great. That's all I'm going to say about that. She's just great. And you guys know that. I've run for president of her fan club several times and lost because there's so many candidates.
All right. Well, thank you, Larry, and thank you, Melissa, for all that you do for the state of Virginia. So anyway, what Larry and I are taking you on today is you're gonna go on a ride with us, a ride through the entire U.S. A couple of years ago, the year before COVID, which feels like 20 years ago, I turned 60 years old, and our company turned 20, IN2L. So IN2L, for those of you who don't know about us, we've ever since our inception now 22 years ago, we've been all about looking at creative ways to engage residents through technology, regardless of where they are cognitively or physically. So it's been a crazy 20-year journey for me since founding the company, and I have so much, just so much appreciation, especially for the whole LeadingAge world. I don't think our company would probably be in existence for all the support that we got through LeadingAge over the years. So the idea for this trip was really just, we got a van, we turned it into a happy little colorful vehicle and drive all over the country, having a little birthday party and some gratitude for the customers that we have out there. And so midway through the planning of the trip, a friend of mine had the idea to reconfigure the cars with speakers and microphones to be able to do carpool karaoke. We couldn't call it that because of licensing, so we called it cruising and crooning. But that totally changed the trajectory of the trip. Is all of a sudden we would show up and have folks hop in the car that would be a part of driving around the area or wherever we would go, and the stories that came out of it. And it turned out to, so as you can see from the stats here, we went through well over 30 states. It actually turned out to be about 40,000 miles driven, about a 4-month journey, visited 150 communities, and it had just a heck of a good time. And it turned out to be much more of a profound experience than I thought it would be. And that's really what this session is about, is talking about some of these lessons learned in kind of a whimsical context of this trip, but just the really meaningful things that came out of it that I think are relevant for your own communities. And we're kind of intentionally, to be honest, we're kind of intentionally not talking a lot about COVID. I think part of this presentation is kind of take a little bit of a break from that, from the hell everybody's been dealing with the last year and a half close to now, and be able to just celebrate the reason that I think a lot of folks got into this whole profession in the first place. So I am thrilled and honored beyond belief to have Larry be joining me for for the van ride. So Larry,
Well,
before we get started, any
let me
comments
chime
you
in
have?
there, Jack. I have the greatest admiration for you and for your company. You're doing this. I met Jack in a member community in Colorado. I was looking at some things this particular community was doing with several innovative areas, particularly technology. And Jack walks into a room, and I'm in an activity room with several computers set up. And I'm sitting next to a woman that is severely impaired from a stroke. Jack comes over and shows me how the technology can help her draw art on the computer that she can then send to her grandchildren. And I was just amazed at what they could do. And then we sat down with a lady with dementia. She could do the same kind of thing. And that's when it really began to dawn on me what technology could do to enhance the quality of life for people. And here's Jack, he's got this big flaxen waxen hairdo. He got a big grin on his face. It looks like they do right. If those of you remember who Dudley Do Right is, and he's having fun with these residents who are in. And I said, boy, this guy is something. So I give him credit for inventing geriatric whack-a-mole. And I've told all of our members, if you don't have IN2L geriatric whack-a-mole, you're missing something for your residents. And Jack, my hat's off to you for doing this. And I encourage every one of you to emulate the model that he's going to show you here today. As we're going to hear and learn some principles of working with people with dementia that could serve all of us really well.
All right, well, that's a good tee off, Larry. Thank you for those nice comments. And really, it is. It's been, whether it's this trip we're going to be talking to you about, or really the whole history of the company, it's been, it's been a whimsical journey, and I've gotten, I think, a heck of a lot more out of it than the folks that we've served. But it's been pretty cool to be able to, to do something that makes a difference. And again, compared to what we do, compared to what you've all been doing the last year, is insignificant. But at the same time, it has been nice to be able to connect so many people through the pandemic. So anyway, on to the van. There's a picture of it, and that's the whole thing that we have. It's still sitting out there in the parking lot. I'm ready for another trip I'll tell you about at the end that I'm thinking about doing next year. So we're going to start by actually taking a little bit of a detour, not a detour, but just a little bit of a hesitation before we step into the van. And that is to talk. We're going to spend a lot of time, and I never would have foreseen this when I was planning the trip, but we are going to be talking a lot about people living with dementia and what they can get out of journeys like this, and what you can learn from the elders who are living with dementia in a journey like this. And we're going to start by framing it a little bit in the context of a musical reference that the professor will walk people through for something called 45s. And that's and Larry will explain it in a second. So the context is and obviously if I was doing this publicly, I could ask this question and you could throw out some answers, but we're not able to do it. So Larry will jump in with the answer. The question is, what do Revolution from the Beatles, We Will Rock You from Queen, and You Can't Always Get What You Want from the Rolling Stones, what do they have in common? And Larry, we'll just, you're the Jeopardy whiz answer here, so take it away.
Well, for those of you young people that don't know what a 45 is, this is the B side of a 45, and it's not a pistol. If you go back, we used to have something called records, and they were the size of a salad plate, and you put them on a record player. You probably never heard that term either. And the B side was usually a throwaway kind of song, but all of these were big hit B sides of these great groups. And part of Jack's point is the A side of dealing with dementia is what we hear every day about the dreadful statistics and things that are coming our way. But the B side, Jack has uncovered the B side of working with people with dementia, and that can be as big a hit as the A side. But just remember, all you young people out there, if you get a chance to listen to a 45 on a record player, play both sides, because you might be surprised at what you will turn up.
Yeah, and you actually, you framed it perfectly, Larry, because that is I tell you, I think it would be cool if the B side of what we're going to be showing you today got as much attention as the A side. I think there'd be a lot of joy to be had. So this is the A side. What Larry was talking about is that, and again, none of this presentation is trying to diminish all this stuff. It's reality. But again, there is another side to it. So this is what we hear all the time. Everything it's all legitimate numbers, everything that's just horrible about the disease. But I think with a couple of tricks that I learned, there's a joy to be had for the people themselves if you can tweak it a little bit. And that's, we'll be talking about some of these tweaks along the way. And I do want to give a huge shout out to my good friend, Mary Haynes, who's the CEO of Nazareth Home in Louisville, Kentucky, that she really, she is the person that really reframed this whole trip and reframed the whole perspective. Because I started IN2L 22 years ago. A lot of our work has been improving the lives of people living with dementia. And so I consider myself somewhat enlightened about this, like an industry expert, and maybe that's a stretch. But what I learned was my own, just my own prejudices that completely is where I was going with the trip. And what that has to do with when I was planning going to a community, I'd want to give them 6 to 8 weeks notice so they could be getting ready for the day. It was just go one city, the next city, the next city as we were driving along. But I had given the advice that I thought was legitimate advice to, hey, we really should probably look at you more independent residents to have as part of this trip. So that's the way I kind of set things up. So the very first stop we had was at Nazareth Home. And what communities would do a lot of times is, in the spirit of the birthday party, they would celebrate something relevant in their area. So in this case, it was Louisville, Kentucky. So it was we were having a Kentucky Derby Day in the middle of August, and so wearing the big hats and such. And anyway, that's Mary there in the middle, and we took this lady out for a spin. It was the very first trip I had set up, and we're driving, and this lady had just had story after story to tell of her kids and her grandkids and her joys in life and her setbacks in life. She was a very strong faith. God was a huge part of her life. So this whole story, this whole just really, really remarkable just conversation for 45 minutes. So I pull back into the community and go right to the independent living part of their life plan community. And Mary's like, hey, no, what are you doing stopping here? Keep going, go around the corner. So we go around the corner, and it's the memory care part of the community. And it turned out that she had, I think, mid-stage dementia. And it just hit me like a sledgehammer that, wait a second, maybe the point of this trip is one of the points of the trip is to highlight people living with dementia as opposed to shying away from them. And that's a lot of what you're going to see in this whole journey. So we're going to start our trip in the middle of Amish country in Pennsylvania, a community, a LeadingAge community in Pennsylvania called Cross Key Village. And this is their adult day program. And so again, we'd set these trips up without having any idea of who's going to show up. And in this case, we just loaded guys into the van, and it was a couple of retired truck drivers. And so the presentation is going to have a lot of video clips, so some of them are a little louder than others, so I apologize. You may have to play with your volume a little bit, but you'll see. Let's hear what a couple of truck drivers had to say when they got out on the road. Speaking of trucks, throw the horn at him. And so these guys were awesome. They had, we get out on the road, these are guys pretty far down the dementia path, and a truck would drive by us. We went on the interstate out there right in Pennsylvania, and a truck would drive by, and they would talk about the size lug nuts on that tire and how you would change the tire, and they talked about the engines and the horsepower and the blah, blah, blah. And they also, luckily, we could edit these things because they had a lot of stories about what it was like being a truck driver in truck stops in the 60s and 70s. So luckily we edited those out. But guys, that were just full of joy. This is a community in Kansas City that one of the things that came out in the trip so many times was the hidden talents that residents had that the staff had no idea. So I'm going to highlight the lady in the front seat. There's no time to show everything. The guy in the back seat, he did a Elvis impersonation that was actually pretty funny. But we're going to focus on the front seat because this lady, funny as heck lady, and she was a yodeler. So here's a quick shot of her yodeling.
I want to string my guitar with yodel-lady-doo. The life that I love, the custodial-lady, yodel-lady-doo. Get out of here before I cry. And it's your yodeling too.
And so she would just yodel away and yodel away. So what do you think, Larry? What do you think about these folks?
Well, I'm thinking about, I think you should emulate that guy's hairdo in the back. Number one is one I thought. And my number two thought is look at the young lady behind her and next to the gentleman, the joy she's finding in listening to this repartee. That tells us an awful lot about intergenerational possibilities here. But here you all of a sudden you're going along and somebody who's probably sitting in their chair staring into space back at the community is riding in your van and yodeling.
Yep. Well,
think about it.
Yeah, and that lady you're talking about there in the back seat, she's young, but she was the rec therapist. And part of why she was laughing is that she's known this woman for a year and had no idea that she liked to yodel. So there'll be more of that as we go along. This is from
Jack,
United
think
Methodist.
about that as a pickup line you could pull into a community and stop a woman on the street and say, "Hey, you want to get in my van and yodel?"
Yeah.
It's got some real possibilities.
Oh, that's why I like having you on. The ideas that you come up with for my next journey, that they're limitless. So here's Pat. You gotta like Pat. She's from a resident from United Methodist Homes in New Jersey. Larry Carlson's a good friend of both Larry and I. We are delighted to have a car full of lovely women, but our star is right here in the front seat. It is Pat. And the coolest thing about Pat, a lot of cool things about Pat, but lean your head down a little bit. Check out this hair. Pat is living it, baby, living the blue hair thing. What kind of computer do you have?
I'll have a Mac, an iPad, and a PC.
A Mac, an iPad.
Pat's got it.
Pat's got it going. A Mac, an iPad, a PC, and blue hair. Larry, I think a little streak of blue, it would go with your
man alive. And I'm just really taken with the yellow sunglasses on top of everything else. Jack,
Yeah.
I think your next phase of your international tour here, you need to spike your hair and dye it pink.
All right, that's gonna fit well with me asking people to come into the van and yodel together. So it's a combo.
You're going to draw some attention by police forces all around the country.
So anyway, those first couple of clips are obviously just joyful clips of people having a good time, and that was a whole bunch of what happened on the trip. But there were some profound stops as well. And this gentleman here from a Brookdale community in New Jersey. It's two different clips. The first one is him just talking about hunting, which kind of speaks for itself. And the second one was it just shows the power of what some of these visits, the impact that they had on these folks. Did you ever go hunting?
Yeah.
What'd you like to hunt?
Me? I was up in Alaska, all the way up the top. I'm in caribou.
Caribou, did you?
I caught one.
You got one?
I got two. Yeah, I got the racks. A rack, big one.
Do you know how much it weighed?
It was big. He walked across outside a rock.
It's gone. One less caribou to go with one less
Bang,
turkey.
Gone.
So anyway, you know, this drive around, the guy, you know, he's talking about hunting. He's talking about, we drove by a Porsche, and he talked about the first car that he had in the early 60s. And just a remarkable trip, and very, very joyful. And then we got to the end of the trip, and we're pulling into the driveway, and it just gets very emotional, and me, I mean, for both of us.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much
man.
for everything.
Thank you.
Yes, my heart. I gave somebody another house, and I went to one of those places where I stayed there.
Yeah, his daughter lives in his house
Oh.
now.
Oh, that's sweet.
And he moved in with us.
I gave it to them.
That's a Christian, man. That's thinking of somebody
I gave it to
besides
them.
yourself.
Yes, I gave it to them, and I said to myself, they need it more than I. That's it.
What a man, man. What a man. I love you, buddy. Thank you for what you've done for us today, and thank you for what you've done in your life.
Yeah.
Okay.
You too. You too.
So we had, you know, it's just such raw emotional moment. And he, as we had been driving, he had been talking a lot about his award. And you know, you don't know what people are talking about, so I didn't think much about it. But after this moment, he really wanted me to come into his room. And I go into his room, and there's this massive plaque from United Airlines honoring him for the work that he did in 9/11 in getting material. He worked for United in getting material from the New Jersey airport to the towers, where the towers went down. And it just, you know, it just completely changes your perspective of who this man is. And then as we were leaving, I was with him for a good hour. And as we were leaving, he looked me in the eye and said, you know, I may not exactly remember who you are, but I'm going to pray for you tonight. And that night, you know, I'm 300 miles away by the time we hit the next city, and it's midnight. And I just felt this spiritual wave come over me. And nobody can tell me it wasn't him saying a prayer for me. So just really impacted me in a very, very profound way. So I know, Larry, you know, you had a couple stories.
I have a strong belief that the spiritual dimensions of our personalities are the last thing to go if they ever go. And I believe you had a mystical experience, and this guy who can't remember where he is or what he had for breakfast remembers you and remembers to pray for you. That's just a powerful statement about dementia and what we don't know about it. And if we're not careful, we can shut that off or never open it up, so that he can be free with the spiritual dimension, whatever he has left. We had a patient in our geriatric assessment clinic back in when I was at Wesley Woods, and the geriatrician was looking in her eyes. She'd been silent for some time, hadn't spoken, and the family was trying to figure out what to do with her. And as the doctor looked through the ophthalmoscope, the woman said out loud, for the first time she'd said anything in a while, I don't think there's anybody in there anymore. Well, think of the irony of that statement. If there wasn't anybody in there anymore, she couldn't have said that. The point is, there is still somebody in there. And this guy, I wouldn't take him out to a shooting range, Jack, but he remembers hunting caribou, and most importantly, he remembers to pray for you when he doesn't remember your name. That's just powerful.
Yeah, no, it was profound. And then along those lines, the gentleman in this front seat here, he very far down the dementia path, the later stages, was having some trouble kind of connecting with him, but it was fine. He was enjoying the drive. He loved to sing. He had a big baritone voice. It's his wife in the back seat. And I asked his wife to just kind of a couple questions about what the journey was like for her, and very cool bits of wisdom from her. And then you'll see the power of music in the second clip.
It has been and still is a very challenging journey to live and watch changes that, as you said, you just can't fathom. And a lot of grief is a good word. I have had significant ups and downs, and I have not hesitated to seek help from Alzheimer's support groups before we came here, doctors, counselors, my church in particular.
So again, just a very articulate woman talking about the journey from her standpoint. But then as I was saying, the guy had a great voice singing, but they got married right out of high school. And so this is truly a lifelong love story. And look at the look on both of their faces when they hear a song, memories from probably their courtship.
Where's my lover?
Right here.
There she is.
Get out of my seat.
You sweetheart, I'm in love with you. Let me hear you whisper that you love me too. Keep the love lights burning in your eyes so blue. Let me call you sweetheart. I'm in love with you.
Oh, that was so intense. And what I talked to the lady afterwards, and she had said that one of the things that she's learned, it's a powerful lesson, I think, for people who have family members living with dementia, is that she's learned to get joy out of a few moments a day, not a few hours a day, and not have expectations of anything more than that. And once she framed her expectations along those lines, everything got a lot better. So anyway, a lot of dementia conversations there. We're going to spend a couple minutes on the independent side of things. And this story, I think, is so telling. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm smarter than anybody running a community. I have no idea how to do that, but I think a couple lessons that came out of it are worth following up with. So this is the stop we made in Canada at a community called Baycrest, and you'll hear this lady talking about how much she likes tap dancing in the back seat.
We used to tap dance New Year's Eve. We'd go to the theater, and before the movie started, we'd do some tap dancing.
Like a show?
Yeah, there was always like a show.
Or we'd go to an army base like Shiloh, and we'd tap dance for the men, and it was I loved it. Yeah. So
tap dancing was just such a big part of her perspective. So we get to the end of the trip, and she's getting ready to leave, and I just kind of had a quick flash. Hey, can you do a little tap dance for me? I had my cell phone ready to take a video, and she does a wind sprint to her room, and I'm just waiting there in the lobby, and she does a wind sprint and comes back in 5 minutes, and here's a quick little show that she'll put on for us.
I'm Sylvia Horwich from Winnipeg, living now at Baycrest, Neptune Drive, and I love to tap dance. Get your coat and get your hat. Leave your worries on the doorstep. Just direct your feet to the sunny side of the street. And hear that pirouette. And I have peace in your step. No drops at my feet to the sunny side of the street.
Yay, all right. The 60-20 tour has its first tap dancer. Sylvia, you are awesome. Thank you.
So I loved her story, but the real message out of that is, and I didn't find this out till afterwards, is that she told me she had not tap danced for 35 years. 35 years. And why? Because no one ever asked her to. And so it was just this crazy, I think, lesson of, I think everybody gets so caught up in making sure people get their meals on time and whatever medical help they need. But, what about their spirit? And just asking that question, and just the humility she had to not tap dance, but also that she had her shoes. She knew right where her shoes were. So, you know, again, it's just amazing to see that kind of thing. And so again, just independent folks running around. This is from Volunteers of America in Minnesota. And then Larry, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked this lady right after. I'll give you a heads up.
Mary, there's a tattoo parlor right there.
Should we stop?
Would you, what, if you, if Jane wasn't here and we were going to get a tattoo, where would you put the tattoo and what would it be a tattoo of?
It'd be a rose on my ankle.
Oh. So she wants a rose on her ankle. Larry, maybe I'm being assumptive. You don't have any tattoos now, but if you don't, where would you put a tattoo and what would it be of?
Well, I was, I've talked to a tattooist about this, and I just wanted a small butterfly in the middle of my back. And the tattooist said, yeah, but in a few years, it'll be a dragonfly and it'll be spread all over. So it just talked me out of it. I decided.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah,
I decided not to do it, Jack, but you go ahead. I think we need an IN2L tattoo that can be given to anybody that wants one as you go through this international tour.
Okay. You're always along with whack-a-mole. So here's a lady. This lady. This is the funniest story. This lady, she gets in the van, we start talking, and the same thing. The staff didn't know she was a professional wrestler in the 60s.
When I went up to Boston, the manager up there said, "No, we're giving you another name." So he called me Candy Star.
Candy Star.
So that was my name in Boston.
Let's get ready to rumble! For Candy Star, professional wrestler. Yeah, that was her. Her wrestling name was Candy Star, and again, no one in the community knew that about her. It was just transformational. So back to the dementia side of things. This may be my favorite clip. This was a drill sergeant, or you'll hear his story. A drill sergeant in Vietnam.
So Dennis, you went to Vietnam.
Vietnam, yes, I did.
Vietnam veteran.
Yep.
What was your role in the Army?
My role in the Army was bloodshots.
You were a drill sergeant.
Yes, I was
right?
drill sergeant.
So, Dennis, why don't you yell at Jack like you're a drill sergeant?
Yeah, pretend we're doing a drill. I'm like,
Do it.
Whatever you tell me to do, I'll do. Like in a driving mode.
I can do that.
Do it.
I'd probably, no, not right yet.
Yes, right yet.
So he's being polite. Not right yet. I don't want to do that drill sergeant thing. But about 2 minutes, literally like 2 minutes later, we run into a construction site, and here's the drill sergeant that you wanted to meet.
Wait a second, what do you think? Looks like we got some trouble. Check it out. We'll turn it there. Okay, Dennis, tell these guys.
Roll the windows down.
Yeah, tell these guys, Dennis, what do you think?
Hey, we need to get through here. Hey. We got radio on here. We got to get through here real quick.
Okay.
Real quick.
That's okay.
We got one sign. That's
let's go.
Oh my gosh. Get up on the
Oh, this is where, this is.
Oh, no.
Yeah, these guys, this is 60-20. We've already made it around the country. We can do some curb hopping. Dennis, you just made one of the best moves ever with your, hey, we got to get moving.
And that's I know over the years I got to know that gentleman with they're very close to our office, and he's the guy that's in the corner that's just kind of slumped over, not talking to anybody. It's fascinating. You get people in a different environment wherever they are. You don't need a van to do it. It's just to get them into a different place. So I don't know, Larry, if you have any comments on that one.
No, what you're doing is exposing them to things they wouldn't see. This is why I think every community ought to get a van like yours and try this. I think this needs to be, every new employee needs to go on this van trip with some of the residents like this, because it opens up a whole new perspective on the lives of the people we serve.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue to what I'm talking about here, is that there were about close to 20 trips where I had CEOs with me along for the ride. And every single time we'd have a CEO on there, I'd get an email later saying how meaningful it was for them to be able to just see the resident eye to eye, not in kind of that CEO place. And here's one example of that. Larry Gamina is a great friend. He runs Ohio Living in Columbus. That's why they put the Ohio State banner in the back there. But you'll see Larry, again, the woman in the back, pretty far down the dementia path, but she loves to whistle. So here's a happy birthday whistle led by the CEO of Ohio Living.
Jack.
And so I think, Larry, what's I forget your line about the behind the desk. That's always.
Oh yeah. That's somebody said a desk is a dangerous place behind from which to run a company. And you see Larry Gamina, Melissa, you ought to get him to come do a seminar for your people. He's one of the great business geniuses in our field. And here he is whistling in a van with people that are demented, and it shows a whole different side of him. I did my fair share in dunk tanks and so forth when I was had a real job like some of y'all.
Yeah.
I remember one year at Christmas Eve, our job was for the executive team to go make Santa Claus rounds in all of our communities, and one of our nurses was in charge of this. Name was Carmen, and she said, Larry, all you have to do is go to your office about 1:45 a.m. There'll be a Santa Claus suit draped on your chair. There's a big bag of presents, and you'll go over to Bud Terrace and ring the doorbell, and they'll let you in, and you deliver the presents. There'll be cookies and punch, and you can have some of that with the staff. And I get to my office at 1:45, and I don't have a Santa Claus suit there. I have an elf costume with a Jolly Green Giant kind of skimpy bathing suit with red tights and pointed shoes and a poofy blousey thing like Seinfeld's poofy blouse, and a hat that was, I felt like a real fool. And I knocked on the door. The staff wasn't sure they wanted to let me in at first, and they finally did. But on the way out, and we had a good laugh over the whole thing. And on the way out, this nursing assistant looked at my backside as I was about to leave the building, and she said, I do love a big-legged man. And at that point, her colleagues just moved away from her, and I turned around and walked back toward her. And she said, I'm going to get fired, aren't I? And I said, no, you're not going to get fired. I'm going to go home and wake my wife up and tell her that if she ever makes fun of my big legs again, there are women in this world that do still love a big-legged man. The day I left, she was at an event, and people remembered that because it says so much about the culture when you can have this is serious business, and we better have fun doing it and be ready to make fun of ourselves.
Yeah. But that's a good segue here too. We were delighted to have I'm sure a lot of you know Teepa Snow, nationally renowned expert on dementia, had a trip with her we're getting ready to wrap up here, but just a good pearls of wisdom from her that really correlate well with what Larry's been saying.
The one and only Ms. Teepa Snow, a longtime partner of ours and a incredibly renowned dementia guru, whatever the heck you want to define yourself
there before
as.
it gets out of control.
Okay, I go along with that.
When people are living with dementia, everybody talks about what they don't have, and we forget what they still have and what they hold on to and what they can do. And so this is a powerful opportunity to take a look at people and look beyond and look at them without dementia, because in this activity, they don't have dementia. They're just themselves. And as a matter of fact, a little more of themselves sometimes than they might have been. But unless I tell you something you wouldn't know, how would you know?
Yeah, that's it. And it was, I can't tell you how many times, Larry, that right before we'd start a trip, the staff would warn me, or this might happen or that might happen, or don't bring this up or don't bring that up. And it was so framed in a negative context, and the people were just delightful once you got out there. So we're getting ready to wrap up. The last thing quickly, I did want to just call out a couple of Virginia cool things, a little bit of a COVID flavor, but Lisa Wilkerson, Covenant Woods, I don't know if you're out there, but we heard all these great, this is, things you can do that are different, that don't need a van. So Lisa's cranking it out from Covenant Woods. I love this birthday Zoom call where you've got a great mix of senses, that it's his 94th birthday, I think. You can see the Zoom call happening. He's got his cake, and over there on the right, he's got his Motor Trend magazine. So again, it's all about reaching people where they are, whether you got a van or not. So I'm going to take it as we wrap things up. Larry, I'll take it off the stop share so people can just see our big mugs here. So anyway, thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Paula, for letting us kind of walk you through this journey. I think what we were trying to show was that, first of all, joy has nothing to do with how old you are, with where you are cognitively, that people living with dementia, if you're not trying to make them who they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, and just enjoy them for where they are now, you'll have a heck of a good time. And I think the last point was that if you're a leader, make yourself have some time outside of your normal CEO role just to get to know some of your residents, because they've got stories, they've got talents, and all they're doing is waiting for somebody to ask them. So thanks, LeadingAge Virginia. Larry, you have any wrap-up words? You've been such a brilliant commentator. Thank you again.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be your Howard Cosell or your Ed McMahon. What this does bring to mind to me is that quote by Mark Twain, who said the two most important days of a person's life are the day they're born and the day they know why. And I'll bet you every encounter that you will have with your residents in a situation like you've portrayed here will remind you why every day you do what you do. And that in itself is the most reinforcing thing we can do to enhance our own careers and the careers of our colleagues that we work with every day, knowing that it's just a very, very difficult job.
All right, that sums it all well. Melissa, on behalf of Lucky and I, thank you again for helping him a couple years ago. Virginia, we love Virginia. Thanks. Over and out.